Kim, you might be introducing yourself.
So,
Will you?
yes, I will. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's okay. So, welcome everybody. It's lovely to see you here. My name is Kim MacLeod from Indie Authors World, for those of you who don't know me. I've had the pleasure of working with Malcolm for the last few months to help publish his book. So, congratulations, Malcolm. Here we are. It is here. More from life. And we're here to celebrate that achievement. So, well done.
Yep. It's good to see it published.
So,
and Kim is responsible for producing it, really, producing the whole thing. I mean, I just had to write it, and she's done everything since everything else, sort of thing. So it's a lot of work.
So we've had good fun, good chats, and we've enjoyed the process of working with you. So what I'm going to do, first of all, just to get us started, I'm going to read you what the More From Life book actually says, what the blurb says, and then we will have some questions. I've got some questions to ask Malcolm. If anybody in the audience watching wants to ask a question, you can pop it into the chat on the call, and we might even get a chance to open up the mic and let you ask the question, but we'll see how the time goes this evening. So thank you to everybody for joining. So what we have is More From Life, and here we are. Do you want to transform your life to feel better? Get fitter, lose weight, gain health to live longer and happier, and help others to do the same. Who wouldn't? Evidence shows that the onset of 70 to 90% of the commonest killer diseases can be delayed, and many chronic illnesses and debilitating conditions can be prevented and even reversed. More From Life offers a 5-stage, tried and tested approach to measure your health and well-being and create improvement based on research, which highlights the importance of lifestyle choices, looking after your mind, body, fitness, and nutrition. So what is your score? With multiple ways to evaluate yourself and gain vital insights, you will have a clear, holistic view of what you can do to feel and get better. And there's a 1 week to a better you. Try the 1 week challenge to see how much you can raise your scores in a few days. It works. And this book is for people of all ages, fit and unfit, coaches, personal trainers, health professionals, educators, and practitioners. So anybody at all who can actually get more from life. There we are. I think that's it. We've done a little pitch then, Malcolm. So
yeah, it was necessarily hyped a little bit, yes.
But this is the reality of getting people interested in your book. So yeah. I wanted to start off just asking you, why did you write this? Yes, what was it that actually sparked your interest to write this book?
You and me have spoken about this quite a lot, and of course, it was you that persuaded me to write that first rather embarrassing preface to the book. And I did, once I kind of started that, I realized it was quite important to try and place the thing in context. And certainly, if we have a farm here. We have a livery yard with lots and lots of horses, and lots of people that come and keep their horses with us. And it's just been very obvious to me over the years that a lot of people in this part of the world, particularly, but maybe in other parts of the world too, aren't managing to understand how to look after themselves. It just seems that way. And so the average healthy life expectancy in this part of the world, in North Ayrshire, is just 55 years of age. 55, and so you can expect by 55 to have something wrong with you, something debilitating, something that will really slow you down or make you feel not very well for the rest of your life. And so it's not just about longevity, and it's not just about lifespan, it's about health span, really. And so I kept I had this accident, and I got bad injury from a horse. I got broken pelvis, and that put me in hospital for a while, and then it laid me up. I wasn't allowed to do very much for a long time while it and sort of started feeling sorry for myself a little bit. Feel myself getting more and more unhealthy. And eventually I started to read about this. I started to worry about things a little bit after a year or so. And the more I read, the more it became clear that there were ways, there were fairly straightforward ways that one could improve one's health. In fact, there were sort of 4 or 5 or 6 things that one should do to try and maintain health. And the more I read about it, the more obvious it became that this was true, and that a lot of people don't seem to understand how straightforward it is. We seem to be moving on a path more and more towards the opposite, where people are doing less and less exercise, eating more and more bad food, ultra processed food, and so on. And so I just thought it was time that we tried to do something about this. And this was in 2019. And I knew a gym owner locally who was quite sympathetic to these ideas. And I suggested that we try and come up with a way of doing it. And I kind of wrote this early version of what the book's about. And we put it into practice in 2019. We had 17 volunteers who came along, and they got scored. So we tested them out of a score of 240 on a whole range of tests, including mental health questionnaire and some medical tests and some fitness tests and so on. And we scored them. So they had a score out of 220, and we sort of put that on a circular graph so they could see where they were doing well and where they were doing badly. And then we invited them to follow a certain regime for 7 days. Just not terrible, just to give up smoking if they smoked, drink no alcohol, eat sort of more plant-based diet, do some exercise, and be nice to people. That was one of the stipulations. They had to kind of talk to people and be nice to people. And 7 days later, they all came back, 17 of them, and we tested them again, exactly the same set of tests, exactly the same, sort of thing, ran the whole thing again. And on average, they scored 10% better. So, and that was remarkable in that in 7 days, we could make that change. So I wrote it up as a paper, and it seemed to me that as I retired and I had not less to do at work, it would be great to turn that into a book. And so that's what's happened. That's how it's worked. So it's expanded that idea and just taken it a bit further forward. So it provides a way for people to score themselves and see, in various ways where they sit. It's more of a holistic kind of thing than I think so many things nowadays are focused on one thing or another. They focus on nutrition, or they focus on exercise, or they focus on, giving up alcohol, or one thing at a time almost, rather than saying that if you can just do a bit more exercise, then you're going to feel better, and that's going to make you, more positive, and then you're more likely to engage in other healthy things. If you start eating a bit healthier, then, again, that's going to reflect in other parts of your life and so on. So the whole thing holds together, if you like. That's the idea of it.
Yeah.
And because so many people that I meet don't really understand that, it seems like, but the question is, how do we get that message out there, of course?
Yeah. And that's a tricky thing, isn't it? Because a lot, as we've spoken about this on and off over the last few months, about there is no shortage of health information out there available to people. I think most of us would know that if we ate a bit healthier or we did a bit more exercise, that it would improve our lives. And yet many of us don't do the stuff that we know that we could. And so I know that you've said you obviously had a personal interest, but to actually get to the stage where you've done and go out and do these tests and then put the work in to create this book, there must really be some passion of yours, because we can all be concerned about ourselves, but to actually get into this and really want to create this into a book to help people. So where does that passion for actually trying to help people come from?
I don't know, but my parents were doctors. Helen, who you can see down the bottom, on my screen, she's down near the bottom. She's a doctor, and my other sister, Carola, she's a doctor. My whole family are medical, mostly. I was brought up in a medical household with lots of medical influences, and so I've always been aware of the sort of medical side of things. But medical stuff is the way that doctors, to me anyway, the way they're taught is very much along the lines of waiting till somebody's unhealthy and then trying to help them to become less unhealthy, or to try and fix the problems that they've developed over time, rather than more preventative and so on. And I'm hoping that medicine moves more towards lifestyle medicine, more towards preventative and so on. And of course, I'm sure Helen will disagree with me and say that people are doing this, but there's still very, very few hours devoted to talking about nutrition, for instance, in medicine. From all the research that I've read and all the people I've listened to, they say that, doctors tell me they only had 3 or 4 or 5 hours maybe in the whole of their degree where they talked about nutrition, and rubbish in, rubbish out. I mean, it's very much you can't expect somebody to be healthy if they don't eat healthily, because that's one of the main things that's contributing to their health. And so they've got to understand what's a healthy diet. And there's so much conflicting information out there. There's so many different vested interests and so many people making money out of selling a story that it's very difficult for, I suppose, for a lot of people to discern what is and isn't good for you. And so I tried to, in the book, I've tried to kind of pick a line which will kind of find something through that. So I've not gone entirely, religiously plant-based. I've tried to say, yes, of course, there are other aspects, other options, but you just have to be aware of the danger of these other things, as it were. So anyway, and you asked about the passion, but it's really because, I sent a letter today actually to the Secretary of State for Scotland's Health Minister. I'll probably get no reply and no interest at all, but I would love it, if I could get some reaction from something like that, where there might be some initiative to see if there could be some way that people in Scotland, to begin with at least, could be helped to start on a path of changing their own health. Because I think as the NHS struggles to cope with the 7 million people on its waiting lists and so on, we all need to become more aware of our own health. We all need to understand where we stand, and then be able to gauge maybe, when we start to drift into more unhealthy ways. But most of us wouldn't even spot it. I think most of us wouldn't know what to do, what to look at maybe. Yeah. I think if you're just recording certain aspects of, where you stand, then you'll start to spot the trends when the trends go in the wrong direction, if you like. And then you'll be able to go to the doctor with useful data and say, okay, this is what's been happening, rather than this wait till something happens to me and then see if you can find a way in to a GP that's already, under lots of pressure and has very little time to see anybody or talk to you about your own worries and so on. They just want to be able to prescribe a drug and move on to the next patient, I suppose. So I would love it if somebody could start, even if it isn't this, if it's just some way of saying, right, okay, let's try and find a way to help everybody to understand where they are with the, and this approach is to try and say, okay, measure yourself according to these 5 different aspects of your own health. And I think that's unique. I've not come across at least a book or an approach which says measure these 5 different aspects of yourself. You don't have to go to a doctor to get a blood test. You can go and do that at the chemist. You can go and buy a little kit, and okay, that's maybe not very as reliable as doing it properly through a doctor, but at least it gives you a start. It gives you a clue, and you can measure certain aspects of lots of things about yourself. I've got all sorts of tests in there, like your reaction time and so on. It's just a simple way of gauging where you stand, and then you'll be able to see where where you stand, where you're strong and where you're weak, maybe, and where the things that maybe need to be checked up on.
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor though, but it has to be said, I'm certainly not a doctor. I'm not medically trained, and so I've tried to make it clear throughout the book that these are just tests that you can try yourself and see how you get on.
And I suppose it's that balance then, isn't it, about taking some personal responsibility for our health and not relying on the oh well, I'll just go to the doctor and they'll fix me. Yeah. And that's I think the beauty of what you have put together with these tests. If people actually started to recognise that what they could do, like you say, just give you a bit of an insight into where you are, and you've then got your own baseline.
Yeah.
And as you did with the your test group, I suppose, that you used, you were able to see even that in the space of a short time, over 7 days, if someone took a little bit of action, it made an impact.
Well, a shocking part of that was that 5 of those 17 people, and these are people who go to the gym. These are not people, they're not dramatically fit, but they're just people who were attending that gym. That was how we were able to recruit those people. It wasn't a scientific sample by any means, but 5 of those 17 were pre-diabetic, and a couple of them broke down in tears. They were just horrified to discover this. They had absolutely no idea, and they wouldn't have had, of course. Heaven knows how long it would have taken before they would have found out maybe that they were. And so they were able to, knowing that, they were then able to do something about it. So, it's just shocking, I think, by how little we probably do know about our own status. And maybe some of us and it takes some kind of, like for me, for example, it took this major accident where I needed pins and bits of metal stuck into my pelvis to get me pulled back together again before I actually took that seriously, So it's, I don't know whether it can work in the long run, but I feel like we have to do something because we are moving further and further down the road of more and more people getting diabetes, more and more people dying of heart disease and so on, and younger and younger. And I don't think the pandemic has helped any of this. Of course, pandemics make this worse, and for the mental health side of things too, of course.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think we need to understand where we stand rather than wait for the nanny state to help us. And it's interesting, I think Helen's there, and I'm aware, of course, the American side of things, that Dean Ornish is an amazing cardiologist who's been at it for a long time, 40 years or so. He's been doing research, and he has the only, as far as I know, the only program that's recognized by the insurance agencies in America to treat heart disease without doing intervention, without doing surgery. So if you can choose to spend $10,000 on surgery, or $10,000 on the Dean Ornish program, which is weeks of just tutoring in 4 aspects. He's got a book called Undo It, and he talks about, he tutors you on how to be more relaxed through meditation, and what foods to eat, how much exercise to do, not intense exercise, just to try and do exercise and so on. So this is now a recognized approach to help people who have severe, quite nasty heart disease. So that's starting to be taken more seriously now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of evidence out there now to say that, you can do something about it. Not in every case, but in many cases.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the thing about just being able to work alongside then, when we do need medical intervention, but being able to recognise what we can do for ourselves. And as you said, not even knowing, because most of us wouldn't have, we haven't done these tests. We haven't been encouraged before to actually look at, well, here's what you can do to kind of test your, to test your own kind of your own health. So you talk in the book about sort of micro morts and micro life, and that's a way for you to kind of sort of come up with a measurement. Can you explain what that actually is for people who don't know?
Andrew will know all about this. Andrew Ray will know all about this. Because there's a statistician who he's a really interesting chap, and he came up with this idea of a micro mort. And then and he said, well, how dangerous are these different things? So he tried to calculate in sort of actuarial terms almost how dangerous any particular activity is. Like, how dangerous is it to ride a motorcycle, or how dangerous is it to jump out of an airplane with a parachute on, and so on. And he calculated all this, and he calculated how dangerous it was to smoke a certain number of cigarettes, for instance. And then he was able to compare these statistically with other dangers, or things that aren't very dangerous. And then he said, well, okay, well, that's micro mort. So that's how dangerous, how likely are you to die doing this? And so I think, if I remember right, you only have to ride a motorcycle 17 miles to have one micromort, and it's about 100 miles in a car, so so a micromort is just a thousandth of a chance of dying, in fact. So then he said, well, what happens if we do it a micro life instead of a micro death? Let's turn it around and make it a lifelong life. And so how much can you contribute to your life? And so he started to calculate how much changing your diet would make to your life, and he started to realize you could actually add years to your life, so that 15 cigarettes takes time off your life, but eating fruit and vegetables adds to your life. And so this was a way to try and show people in a calculated way, in sort of mathematical people, how you could calculate the difference that you could make to your life. And it was dramatic. Years that he was calculating.
So how did you how have you taken that then to bring that into the scores then, for
it seemed very appropriate, because I had already developed these scores, and I came across this micro life idea, so it seemed to fit quite nicely with that. And so the scores are just marks out of 10. Most of them, almost all of them, are marks out of 10, except for there's a few at the end which are very, very important, like to do with smoking, for instance, is by far and away the most important characteristic. So to give it 10 points would have been silly. So it's given a much more, much bigger weighting, and alcohol is also given quite a big weighting. But most of the rest are just marks out of 10. So you just score yourself out of 10 for each of these different things. And I've got a table so that you can score yourself depending on where you sit in that. And then you can see, okay, well, I did quite well in that one, but I didn't do so well in this one. So what do I have to do in order to improve that score? And that one score will then improve the rest of my scores, and so on. And as I become better at that, presumably that'll have knock-on effects in other parts of my health. I'll start to, other scores will appear to, will improve as well.
Because so you have these different components, of of the kind of know your score, so we're putting together. So like I said, we've got, I mean, even on here, what we created this kind of like this graphic just to kind of get that sense of, the mind, nutrition, exercise, body, and then what we had at the center of our habits effectively that then, can contribute to all of this.
Yeah.
Is there one element more important than the others?
Well, that's a great question. Because there's so much controversy about this. There's a chap called Peter Attia who's become very famous for writing a book called Outlive, and he's convinced that exercise is it. He will come on and tell you for hours on end on podcast after podcast that exercise is all that matters. And I think it's rather a sad kind of attitude he's got. Actually, he's a doctor and he's very well qualified, very well read, and certainly it wouldn't challenge his understanding of situations. But I think he's so biased towards exercise, and he's been a weightlifter more or less, kind of, and a sort of a strong sportsman, but particularly interested in weights and so on for years. And so I think he has that bias. And then you've got other people who are completely and utterly vegan convinced. They just have no other interest other than in vegan lifestyle, which has an effect, of course, not only on the way that they eat, but also on the way that they treat nature. That they think that it's going to be far better for the planet, because we're not, cows are so demanding of resources, and if we all stop eating beef and drinking milk, then we would have far more land to play with, and far less of our valuable plant resources would have to be fed to these animals in order to produce minimal amounts of protein for us. So we could all survive quite happily on plants. So there's that aspect to it, and of course they're worried about the welfare of the animals. They're worried about the conditions that a lot of these battery hens and pigs and cows and so on are kept in, and the fact that we're depleting the planet of all these fish resources, and we're just sort of raping the seas and dumping lots of plastics in them and so on. So there's a huge movement there behind the vegan side of things. And so there's a strong a group of people who would say that plants are the most important part of it. Plant-based diet is by far the most important part of it. But then, where are you if you don't have, if you're not happy, if you're not contented? And so Dan Buettner and the Blue Zone books that he wrote, and the community he's found time after time after time, there are 9 things that he says that we must have in order to have a long and happy life. And so he's interviewed people who live to 90 and 100 as a normal part of most people in these places, these 5 different places in the world that he's chosen, and he's found that there are certain characteristics that come out again and again, and a lot of it has to do with just having friends and keeping up with people and just being sociable, and so less of the intense exercise and so on. But they happen to, of course, they live on local plants and so on, so it's not as if they're going to the supermarkets and buying junk. But the most important thing as far as they're concerned, or he thinks, is the fact that they've got a community, that they've got a strong family ties, that there's this basis for a happy life, if you like. So that's what really leads them through it. And some of them, of course, are spirituals, or some of them have faith, and so he thinks that contributes to some, not all. I think there's 2 of the 5 that are strongly, faith-based. So it depends where you're coming from. It's all there's all of these characteristics, all of these factors seem to be important. But and different people will tell you different stories.
Yeah, and that's what I said before, this conflicting message that people get as to what what's important. And
but what's going to come out of it is that what's going to come out of it is that you're aware of the critically important parts in the middle, not one thing or another. And don't worry about being vegan too much would be my message. Don't get tied up too much in that kind of thing. Yes, plant-based, yes, of course, but don't get stuck in the vegan thing. In fact, that might carry you down a wrong road of just eating crisps and cakes that aren't animal products. I knew somebody who just ate chips and curry sauce, and that was they called themselves a vegan. So don't get stuck in that rut. And in the same way, don't worry too much about the exercise you're doing. Just do enough to keep yourself busy every day. Stay active for as many hours a day as you can. Just do something, and give yourself a purpose, and keep up with your friends and your relatives and so on. Try and engage as much as you can with the world.
And that's what Rachel's just asked you, because she's just said, what do you think are the first steps then towards living a healthier life? Because it can feel very overwhelming, seeing all the different things that we're told to do.
Yeah.
And if
Well,
someone's sitting there going, oh God, where do I start?
the obvious answer is, Kim, is buy the book. And,
exactly. Here we are. Right, Rachel, get the link up there, product placement.
No, I mean, I deliberately put
the
first chapter in which the scoring starts is deliberately the mind chapter, because I think you first of all need to sit down and think about how you stand, how you feel, how are you, it's just called mind, but it's really just try and get a feel for how happy you are at the moment. Be honest with those answers and just don't think about it too. I just put down the first answer that comes to mind, as it were, and then reflect back on that and think, okay, is this where am I happy with these scores that I've given myself? Which parts of this am I doing well, and which parts am I maybe not doing so well with? And then after that, you can start to go into the other tests. But I think it's quite important that you gauge your own mental health, as it were, first.
Yeah.
Are you happy with the way your life is moving at the moment? Are you content with the way things are? And if you're not, then where should you go? What should you do about it? And then you can test the other aspects and try some of the others. I'm not saying you should do all of them necessarily, but just do the ones that you quite fancy doing, and to do the ones that you'd like to try. Give them a go and see how you get on, and that'll help to sort of, I don't know, point out where you stand.
Because I think
it should be fun.
Yeah, if somebody's saying that if someone's really happy with their life, and they might know that they are not as healthy as they could be, but they'll possibly then be less inclined to do something about it, because we tend to I suppose, like we said, we wait until there's a bit of a crisis, there's something happens, or the people around us, somebody's is ill, or somebody dies, and suddenly it's then oh my goodness, it's the shock, what do I do? And then you see that whole thing about jump into it and do everything.
And the people I know around here, especially, I'm so aware of it around here. And there's a group here called the Fit Ayrshire Dads, run by a chap called Kev Brown, who is a wonderful guy who's stimulated a huge amount. And it's really important that he's managed to find 3,500 men. He set this thing up, which is called Fit Ayrshire Dads, and he's 3,500 men joined onto this thing within very few months. He set it up as a Facebook group. Now, why have so many men in the Ayrshire area all signed up for this? Why do they all come there? It's because they're not sure what to do. They're not happy with the way things are, particularly, and they're not sure what to do. And what he's done is he's generated a lot of community stuff. People go for walks and runs and chats and stuff like that. He's got lots of things going for these people, and it's really made a difference, a huge difference. And so I'm talking about people who are, I don't think anyone would mind me saying this, I don't have to mention any names, people who are confirmed drug addicts, people who've tried to commit suicide, people who are really, really in trouble. And that initiative has made a huge difference to these people's lives. And these men are, and it started off as Fit Ayrshire Dads, it's now expanded a little bit into families as well. But his concentration was because so many men are committing suicide, and so many men are middle-aged men particularly are sort of left not knowing what to do, I suppose. And so this is a massive focus for him. And it's worked. It's really worked. A lot of men now are finding that there's something there for them, and they've come to it. So that's really the what I think needs to be done. But what that is about is just this one small group, if you like, and it needs to expand into other groups.
Yeah, but it can only take a few people, or getting together, starting to talk about it. And I think that's the thing, obviously, what we're hoping that with your book, that it people start to just go, oh well, you know what, I've done this.
Yeah.
Here you are, you try. Here's the questions. Go and you try this.
Because I'd love it if GPs were able to say something like, it doesn't have to be this book, obviously, but if there was a way that GPs could say, okay, here, look, have a look at this.
Yeah.
Have a go at this. And just, that gives them something to give people other than just pills.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're just, I know
that sorry to interrupt you again, Kim. I'm just going to say, I know that one of the local gyms that I've talked to says that they've got 30 places, free places, that they've got funding. The Scottish government has provided them funding for 30 places. And they've been to GPs and they've said, look, send anybody you want along to us. We can take them on for free. Not a single place has been taken up. Not a single place. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's what we've said with the challenge of getting people to be interested enough to take some action for themselves. And
he blames it on the GP. He says the GPs aren't suggesting it. He says it's the GP's fault, not the people's fault.
Okay. So with your tests, right, and we have all of this, what is it, just for people who haven't read the book and don't know yet, are the tests, would it be expensive? Would it be difficult to do? How have you actually compiled this?
The vast majority of the tests are free. Anybody can try them. The exercise tests require no equipment really at all. Most of them, they just you can just use I think the only equipment you need is a broomstick and a tape measure or something. I mean, and one of these too. You really, if you haven't got a smartwatch or something like that, then it's probably worth buying one. Just record steps and heartbeat. Really, that's really all you need is resting heart rate and how many steps you're doing. That kind of thing, basic measurement stuff. But no, they don't need a lot for that. For the medical tests, I'm only recommending that people do a cholesterol test, which is very kind of basic, I suppose, and a blood glucose test. But both of these things can be bought at the chemist, so it shouldn't cost you a lot. And I suppose if you don't want to do it, you can get your doctor to do it for you instead, which would be the more reliable option if you don't want to pay for it. But most of the tests are free. I mean, my test, for instance, for cognitive ability is to turn 52 playing cards over, and then try and do pairs, the old game of pairs. And usually you play with somebody else, but instead of playing with somebody else, just do it yourself. See how long it takes you. It took me 5 minutes and 36 seconds, which I thought was great. But then I asked one of the girls here who's at university in Aberdeen, who she gave it to one of her medical students, and one of those girls did it in 2:40. So I thought, oh, wow. So I mean, you can. So that's just how long does it take you to turn to make up pairs of cards? And that's a test you could try at any time. It's just a pack of cards. And the same with a ruler. You can hold a ruler. Somebody holds a ruler above your fingers, and then they let it go, and you see how quickly you can catch the ruler on the way down. And that's a measure of reaction time and so on. Most of these things are dead easy to do. You sit with your back against the wall and your legs sticking out, and you see how long you can do that for. Or a plank. How long can you do a plank for? And so on. So they're not complicated. They'll be quite easy to do, and the instructions should all be there, which would enable you to carry any of these tests out. And the mental health stuff is just 40 questions, 4 10-question, 40 questions. You just answer the questions, give yourself answers out of 10 for each one, and then you're able to see what your score is there and which bits of it you think you felt, were low scoring, and which bits were high scoring.
And that's what we're saying, because I think one of the early discussions that we had was, okay, so now I've got my score. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Because that's I think some people have raised. It
means nothing. It means nothing at all except to you. And I don't really I am worried that we might end up with people comparing scores, which is going to be a little bit dangerous, because the number itself only means what you put into it. And obviously we don't want. Somebody said to me, Malcolm, why would you not cheat? And I said, well, what would be the point of cheating? Because it's only for you, the score. It's your tally of what you currently stand at, sort of thing. So it's not for broadcasting. It's not for mentioning to anybody else necessarily. You might say, I did well in this and I didn't do so well in this in your chat, but I wouldn't expect anybody to put their actual scores up, at least. But who knows? I don't suppose it's controllable that way.
Yeah,
that wasn't the intention. The intention wasn't to give you a universal standard or anything like that. It was just to give you a gauge.
So once I've done the tests, I've got my score. I'm looking at that and I'm going, oh, that looks a little bit low, maybe, or maybe a wee bit concerned about that.
Yeah.
And you've given some guidance on a few things that I could then do just to get started. So what kinds of simple things can I do just to move forward? Well,
in the chapter, so the third chapter, which is on the mind side of things. So the first 2 chapters are just introduction, really.
Yeah.
And the third chapter, which is on the mental health side of things, there's some very well known, very well understood, not non-controversial suggestions that people can do to improve how they feel about things. And it says clearly, if you find that you're scoring very poorly, and if you're giving yourself very low marks, and you really discover that you're rather really, really unhappy with things, then you really need to go and see somebody about it. But that's the case with everything. It's the same. I say that all the way through this book. If you find that any of these scores are bad, dramatically bad, then you need to go and talk to somebody else about it. Go and get some advice about from somebody who knows what they're talking about. But generally speaking, people who just aren't feeling great, and they're not, currently things aren't going very well. And there's some very well-known ways to try and help you to get out of that way of feeling. And I've put those in the book but I'm not writing anything terribly revolutionary or anything. It's just some well-known ways of dealing with this. And it's the same with most of the chapters. So if you need to do improve your exercise side of things and so on, it's all there. It's all come from research and all the reading that I've done over the last 5 years or so.
And then we've got even like I said, I could start with a 7-day challenge.
Yeah.
So just to kind of go, right, okay, I'm going to improve something for 7 days, because there's a chance that I might be able to stick something for 7 days, and then I can test myself again, and then, oh, I've improved.
Yeah.
And what would your hope be then if someone does, if they do 7 days?
Yeah, I'm very score based, and I think a lot of men are. I'm not sure about. I think that the park run thing, for instance, is a great example of this. I think people are always interested in whether they're going to beat their personal best in whatever thing, and they're always talking about their scores and so on. So I thought scores were a good thing to introduce, because then you've got something to hold on to. If you just wrote something about how do you feel, and there was no numerical or assessment, then it would be hard to know whether you were getting worse or better, as it were, whether you felt better at the end of the day. So these scores are purely just there to try and give you a gauge for how you are getting on, if you like. And so you should be able to see yourself improve on some of the things you do. And so, for instance, if you do more exercise, then you should be able to improve your scores in the exercise department. But that will also, as I say, have an effect on other things.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with if you've got a very poor diet, you should find, or if you're drinking a lot, or if you're smoking a lot, or whatever, and you can just, for those 7 days at least, just try and cut out alcohol and try no smoking, and try and drink lots of water and get lots of sleep, just for 7 days. Just live a reasonably healthy life. I got it all explained in that chapter on the 7-day challenge. It's all explained there, and I give detail on how you should do this.
Yeah.
And just see what the difference it makes. See if it does make a difference. And if you find that you can't cope with it, or maybe some of it'll stick though. Maybe you'll find that it's not so bad eating some of the things that I recommend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then that's the thing, is that you're suggesting those little changes as well along the way.
Yeah.
It's not a case of, right, okay, wait, maybe stop smoking, or cut down, or try adjust your diet, and exercise a little bit more, walk a little bit more.
Yeah.
So from that way, I think it's an accessible route for people from what you've put together.
Well, I'd like to think it was. We'll see. I don't know. I mean, to me, it seems that way. To me, it seems like the only way forward for us is to try and say, okay, look, you need to start doing something about it. You need to start doing something about your own health. And I'm sure not everybody's going to be, going to go for this, but even if just some people went for it, even if, if I could, 10% of the people I talk to could do it, that would make a difference to them, I think.
Yeah.
And then they might, encourage other people to do it and so on. If it just take an interest in those aspects of their own health. Anyway, so that's the idea of this, is to try and see if we could start a movement towards people. And there are lots of people who are aware of this stuff, but let's have more people doing it. I talk to people in as I say, in the yard here, in the business. I talk to people, and it's clear that they really don't know very much about all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I honestly know a number of people in this yard, just that small group of people, who've come to me and said things like, Malcolm, and this will be when they're not even 50 years old, they've come and they'll say things like, my doctor just told me that I'm diabetic. And I said, oh, did you not know? Did you not have it? No, I had no idea. I've been told I've got to be on pills for the rest of my life. And, and they have, it's just astonishing to me that they had no clue and they had no interest or anything. It was just a sort of a revelation to them. And they have no idea what that means either. They don't understand what effect that's going to have on their lives, really.
Mm-hmm. And then there's even those of us who think that we're healthy, as you were saying earlier, who might have no idea that there's something, that we're not as healthy as we think we are. And this, doing the scores, looking at where we are, like you said, potentially then flagging up something that we weren't aware of, and being able then to take that information to a GP. GP
is going to hate me for this. There's a couple of doctors here who probably hate me for doing something like this, but because in some ways the doctors really will absolutely hate this stuff, because there'll be people coming to them with this stuff and they'll say, look, mate, this is know, but on the other hand, I remember a long time ago a guy called Eric Topol, who was one of the first people to invite people to carry an iPhone around, and he had a special device on it which he could actually tell whether somebody was an AFib or you know, whether they were having problems with their heart. He could do it in real time. So quite a lot of his patients, he gave them this sort of thing that they just clipped onto their iPhone. And this isn't back in 2014. I mean, this is, you know, nearly 10 years ago. And they were able to just say, Doc, you know, what's happening? And he was able to say, yeah, no, that's a problem. Go and book yourself in quick. Or no, that looks okay to me. So there was an actual ECG being produced, you know, in front of his eyes, in real time. So this is bound to happen more and more. We're going to move into more and more of I mean, already you're getting these continuous glucose monitors being put on people's arms and so on. And of course, that's going to have, there are negative sides to that, because people are going to start worrying then, and they're going to see spikes, and they're going to not really understand that it's normal to have spikes sometimes and so on. But it's just all about education. And if we just keep people in the dark all the time and say, oh, well, you know, don't do anything unless your doctor tells you to, then there's going to be this ignorance. We have to try and bring the level of ignorance up and try and or awareness up, so that people become more aware. And so if they do wear a glucose monitor, they can start to spot the foods that in their particular case trigger, you know, these spikes, but not to be too worried about the general, you know, outline. I mean, but they will need help to interpret these things. But maybe doctors will become more and more able to do this online, and maybe it'll become more and more of that sort of thing. We'll still need doctors face to face, but there'll be more and more help, and AI presumably will be able to give help in helping people to understand what this data means. I'm talking maybe 5 or 10 years ahead, I suppose.
So I suppose you're just a little bit ahead of the curve then for everybody
else. I don't
else.
know if I'm ahead of the curve. I don't claim that at all. I'm just frustrated because I just see so many people around me who are getting ill early and don't realize it, and also don't realize that they can stop that happening and maybe even prevent it or reverse it. So they, you know, they don't really understand that they can do something about it by just changing the way they live.
So Helen's saying the company is called Cardia.
Eric Topol's company.
So heart rhythm monitoring. So and that's thing. So there's lots of tech.
Well, Helen herself is, she's in the book, and with it, she's developing a device for which will be, you know, a measurement device. I won't go into it. Helen can talk about it if she'd like. I don't know the technicalities of it, but she's developing something which will help people to define their status long before it becomes a problem. Is that right?
So kind of, she says. Maybe maybe die, maybe no, as I would say here. But so what, if anybody's got questions, just to remind you, by all means you can put them into the chat if you want to, if there's anything you want to know. How can the people that are here tonight then, other than buy the book, how can we all help with this? What could we do to help spread this word or get something? You know, is it just about doing the test ourselves and then talking to somebody? You know, would that be an idea for you to help it, to get stuff?
It's a great question, Kim. I hadn't anticipated that question. I don't know, really. I'm not sure how we do this. How do we spread the word? How do we get this message out there? How do we make people do this? I mean, a lot of people are already aware of a lot of aspects of this, but how do we make it more universal? How do we make it more happen more? And so as far as I'm concerned, it's just it's a spread the word thing, but it's very, very hard. And the vested interests out there are going to stop us in every single turn we can, because it's very important. The drug companies want to sell drugs, so they want to keep us on drugs. Food companies want to sell crap, processed food to us, so they'll keep on pumping that and telling us that it's good for us, or at least not very bad for us. There's no money in fruit and veg. They're just, who's going to make money out of selling fruit and veg? Who's going to make money out of exercise? Telling people to go and have walk on the beach or in the local forest or something, or talk to their friends and go out for and do something with their friends, or play a game of table tennis or something. There's no money in any of this, so nobody's going to push it. There's no funding for it. There's no academic justification for it. The big bodies of this world, the big pharma, big ag, big food, big everything, are all pushing their message, and they're going to make very sure that you don't get a different message as they possibly can. Just look back to the 50s with smoking, and how many messages were being put out that said smoking was good for you, and doctors were turning up with cigarettes in their mouth saying, yeah, I like Chesterfields and so on. It's going to take a long time to get this changed, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I think for me, one of the things that is admirable that you've done it is that you've produced this book and you have nothing to sell. We were talking about this the other day, that it's a passion, it's obviously an interest. Yeah, you have sort of family background, but experiences of yourself of going through stuff. But anybody, or most of the people, if you go and look at books that have been produced around health, a lot of the people who are producing something have got a product or a service or something that they're selling. Then even on the back of that, like you say, even all the health tests and assessments that we can do out there are based on somebody else making some money from this.
Yeah, I think that's true to an extent. I think if you check your doctor out and find out if they sell supplements, for instance, that's a pretty good sign that there may be a shark. I think that there are some people out there who don't have as much moral commitment to this as maybe, but I mean, that's not to say that they're all on. I mean, I could name you quite a few that actually I wouldn't say that at all about, and that I would think are really, really great examples of old-fashioned doctoring, and fantastically good examples as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And you and me both know. In fact, I think the first time we spoke about this book, didn't we?
Yep. How Not to Die. Yep, that's it on my bookshelf too. Yep.
That's a great example of what I'm talking about. He's a really, really amazing guy.
Yeah.
And there are quite a few others around. So let's not write them all off. There are some bad apples in the barrel, but and unfortunately these guys are very famous and they make a lot of money, as you say, and they pop up again and again and again, and they mix their message with the they mix their message with what the kind of sense or with real evidence. So it's very difficult sometimes to tell the difference.
Yeah.
But there's some really quite nasty folk out there too as well. So but I would happily name them, but maybe not here.
Maybe not here. No, we don't want to be sued. So if I could do a little bit of time travel with you now, Malcolm, and we're going to fast forward 10 years. Lots of people have bought your book. There's people out there using the tests. It's starting to really have an impact. What do you think that you would see, or what would you hope to actually see then going on in the world?
People would be healthier for longer. People would live a healthier life for longer. But I don't think my tests aren't the be all and end all.
No.
This is just a book, but maybe somebody will pick it up and go, right, that was rubbish. I can do much better than that. I can produce a much, much better version of that. So they'll take my book and move on with it, and they'll take it further, and it'll go, and the next version will be better or more palatable, more easy to use, whatever. And so it's just a beginning, maybe, hopefully, of this sort of stuff. I mean, and somebody may have come across something else. I haven't, but somebody may have come across somebody else, and you could feed it. I'd be happy to see what it looked like. But yeah, so everybody. More and more people, let's say 10%, would be able to live a longer, happier life for just be healthy for longer. Yeah. Enjoy life more for longer, not find this ceiling that they hit at quite a young age, where they then have to cope with ill health for the rest of their lives, and their family and their friends and so on have to look after them as well. So it's what I mean. It would be lovely if that was the case, if people could learn how to sustain and maintain themselves for long.
Yeah. So that's me. So I come to the end of my questions. Good. I have one little thing that I wanted to read from from the end of your book that for me just kind of summed up where we are, or where I would hope, and it was on page 177, and it says that the ancient Chinese proverb that we have two lives and the second one begins when we realize we only have one.
Yeah.
Confucius says.
Apparently. It's credited to him anyway.
So yeah, and that's the thing. I think it is the key message, really, that we've got this life while we're here. We can do what we can, and we hope that what they said you've kind of done a little bit of contributing towards people hopefully, taking a little bit of action. And if we can do that, then we've helped people realise they've got one life, and hopefully it's happier, healthier, and that we can support one another in that. So, so Michael's just said, thanks, Malcolm, for your passionate exposition. I hope that the book has healthy sales.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much. So just before we finish off, what I would love to do, if we were in person, we would have given you a big cheer. So if you can unmute your mics just for a second, and we're going to just give Malcolm a round of applause and say congratulations and thank you very much for all your hard work you put in the book together, and for all your honest
thank you very much for all coming along tonight. That's very kind of you to come along and attend.
Can we say? Congratulations. Thank you.
Well done, Malcolm.
Well done.
Well done, Malcolm.
Well done.
Well done, Malcolm.
Bye.
Well done, Malcolm.
Bye.
Nice one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.